Boom, I'm in the room. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to everyday conversations regarding mental health. And the reason that you guys are here is because there's nothing on the telly. And I'm coming to you live from the old Heale Manor. And I'm your host, Lord Heale. So, this evening, let's have a look. Don't forget, first Wednesday of the month, we've got the live awesome quiz. Next week is a Halloween special. Come along Wednesday. It's going to be 8 o'clock Greenwich Mean Time because clocks go back this weekend. Don't forget that. They go back an hour, so you get an extra hour in bed. But this show's all about mental health and taking the stigma out of it. Now, this evening, I've got a couple of fantastic guests on. They are both ex-service people, and tonight we're going to talk a bit about post-traumatic stress disorder and post-service. So quite often when the serviceman leaves the services, it's not until a couple of years later that things catch up on them. So without too much further ado, I'll bring the guests in and we can start a conversation. So here they are then. Boom. Brian and Jeff, welcome.
Thanks. So, we don't usually get the confetti and the ticket tape parade. That's quite the intro.
I like to treat my guests with a little bit of respect. give them.
We might have
give
to
them a little
start
bit of a boost.
that everywhere we go, Jeff.
Yeah, that's value.
Special guests, so you get special treatment. So, Brian, if you could just give us a quick heads up on your career and just bring us into where you come into the conversation.
Sure. You can tell from my accent, I'm an American. So, Brian Andrews, I'm a U.S. Navy veteran. I served in the U.S. Naval submarine community. So I was an officer on a fast attack submarine in the Pacific. So I never got to cruise around Great Britain, go through the Arctic or anything cool up there where you guys are at. But I did get to hang out in Pearl Harbor and then go further west and visit our friends and off the coast of Russia and Korea and China and all that sort of stuff. So that was a good time. And then after I left military service, I focused on entrepreneurship and eventually migrated somehow through weird circumstances into book writing. And I met my co-author, Jeff Wilson, at a thriller writers convention. And we became friends and started, strangely enough, co-authoring. And that's really when everything took off. And now we've been writing together since 2015. And we have, I think, almost 24 books under our belt. So it's been quite an adventure.
Wow. Prolific writers then. So Jeff, give us a quick heads up about your career.
Yeah, well, first, I can't believe we've been writing together since 2015. That's a long time. That's I'm gonna have to recover from that for a moment. Like Brian, I'm an American, and I'm also a Navy veteran. My career is a little less mature and a little more eclectic than Brian's because I have apparently attention deficit disorder. So I've done many, many things. I originally went into the Navy to fly jets and was in a motorcycle accident, left the Navy, flew commercial corporate jets for a time. And during that time, I went and worked for another part of the federal government over here in the United States and did some strange things with them. And then eventually I went to medical school to go live a life of peace because I got tired of that violent life. And that was going to be my plan. I was going to just be an academic vascular surgeon. I was going to teach residents and write papers and be rich. It was going to be awesome. And then a bunch of jackasses crashed some planes into the towers and the Pentagon and the field in Pennsylvania. And like everyone else, it just pissed me off. So I went back on active duty in the Navy and deployed as a combat surgeon with the Marines on a deployment in Iraq. And while I was downrange, I ran into some friends from my spooky past who said, you know what you should be doing? And then I woke up one day and I was suddenly a combat surgeon with a an East Coast-based SEAL team. I'm not sure how that happened, but then I did multiple deployments with them and eventually ended up in a joint counterterror task force. Did that for a few years. And unlike Brian, my writing sort of pulls that through that whole time. Brian sort of came to writing after he got that behind him. I always was writing. It was sort of my mental health catharsis, if you will. Since I was a child, actually, I've been writing. But I started writing books while I was deployed. I wrote my first book in Iraq and wrote several after that. So for me, the writing was already there, but my career didn't take off until I met Brian. So apparently he's the brains of the operation. And now, like he said, we've got 24 books, 4 different series. We've got a dozen projects in development for film and television. So I guess it all worked out until I decided to change careers again. That might happen, Brian. I should warn you.
Oh, well, I might have to lock you down with the contract.
That's the attention deficit, is it? Kicking in there.
Indeed.
So quite varied careers then. So I guess for Brian's side of it, PTSD in the submarine service, I guess the only thing that you can get from that is having problems when you're deep dived. And that can have an effect on your mental well-being, obviously. And I can understand from Jeff's point of view, being in the combat side of it. Yeah, because that happened to me. I did a bit of a full career, but I was deployed out in my early days. I did Northern Ireland a few times, and one or two things that sort of catch up with you occasionally on that. But more recent times, when I've been deployed out to Afghanistan and stuff like that, we had some hairy moments. And it wasn't until I retired back in 2018, and then in 2020 when we got locked down, I started hitting the bottle a little bit too much, and some of the stuff that I'd done had kind of crept up and bit me in the backside. Is when I decided that I needed some help, because obviously as a welfare officer, I spent 8 years as a welfare officer, I knew the signs and symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder stuff. And although it wasn't bad, I realised I needed some help. And it was at that stage that I sought the help that I needed. So I went to the doctor. They sent me on to a psychiatric team to evaluate and all the rest of it. Although they were really good, they were civilians and they didn't understand the mental stuff that I've been through with the military. So I had half a dozen sessions and it didn't work for me. And it wasn't until I had a chat with some mates that had been through similar stuff that's when I managed to get it all stacked away and put it into a box. So now I'm okay. Just about. So,
or at least as okay as you were before.
Yeah. So I guess that happens to an awful lot of guys. While you're going through it, while you're in the game, your training kicks in, you just get on with it. And it's not until it all stops and you lose that support network around you that sometimes it can catch up on you. And I guess you've seen some of that, Jeff.
Yeah, I'll tell you what resonated with me, Tim, was you mentioning that, the mental health people were certainly kind-hearted and tried their best to help, but it was reconnecting with mates from your time in service that was the key to the whole thing, right? And I think that's really, really common. Brian and I have the opportunity to work with transitioning veterans quite a bit. We use our platform to give back to the veteran community, whether it's lifting up people that are transitioning out of the military and trying to find their next place, or dealing with issues like this. And I think that idea that you're still in community with your fellow service members really is more important than almost anything else you do. Because for me, and I won't speak for everybody, but for me, when everything sort of came crashing back down on me, just like for you, it was well after I had left the service, and I thought I was fine until I wasn't. But it was really a sense of isolation, a sense of, being separate. Like my identity was so tied up in all those things that I felt like I didn't really have a connection, that a support system. We have the VA here, and the VA is great, but it's not the same as, even in the VA, most of these people are civilians who have great hearts for helping us. But being in connection with your fellow veterans, with your mates, with your teammates, that does more than anything, because that removes that sense of isolation and it returns that sense of identity, right, Brian? Like we talk with guys about this all the time, that, their identity is so tied up in their military service. When they're out of the service, they don't know who they are anymore. You agree with that, Brian?
Absolutely. And when we talk about that word transitioning, in this sense, we're applying it to going from active duty to, civilian life, civilian status. You've lost that entire sense of purpose, and this is what gets me up out of the bed every morning. You know what you've committed to this. This is what I do. And so now you have to find a new purpose, a new what do I do? And I think that that's a challenge, especially the longer that you've been in military service. It's more difficult. The more relationships you had and the more sort of accustomed you've gotten to. I'm not going to say we take those things for granted. I don't think we do, but I think there is a certain habituation process that happens where it sort of sneaks up on you the longer that you've lived a certain type of life and had a certain career. And so I think that it makes a lot of sense that right when you 6 months after you're out, suddenly you feel very, very much alone.
Yeah, I think lots and lots of guys go through that, and it's because I spent 8 years as a welfare officer, my last 8 years, and we were transitioning quite a lot of guys out, particularly guys that have been injured and wounded, and those are the guys that are getting lots of support and everything through the medical side of stuff, but it was the guys that were transitioning out as time. They'd finished their time, so they were going out into the big wide world again. Those are the guys that didn't get the full support, although lots of the guys had seen lots of action. I mean, particularly the Grenadier Guards and the Coldstream Guards that we were dealing with, they were on operations while I was a welfare officer, and we were having to send our fit guys that are coming out of training to the battalion that was deployed, and getting back their broken guys. And it was for us it was a real juggling, well, not particularly me, but the sergeant majors, to find enough fit guys to go and do the guards on the Queen's Guards for Buckingham Palace and all the rest of it. So it was a constant juggle at the time, and on top of that, we were getting visiting officer jobs to go and visit guys that had come back injured. So we were constantly up and down to Birmingham to see the guys in hospital. So the injured guys were getting lots of support, where the guys that weren't injured but coming back didn't. And I think those are the guys that's probably going to have problems further down the line post their service, because they haven't had that sort of network of briefings and all the rest of it that the injured guys get. Does that make a lot of sense to you guys? Is that similar to what you've experienced over there?
Yeah, I think that's right. Although I will, with one caveat, I will say that, and I think it's the same in the UK, but here in the States, there's really been an amazing growth of awareness for the mental health challenges of the veterans. Like, at the beginning of this 20 plus year engagement, I think that there was still the stigma. PTS was something that happened to the weak guys, something that happened to the guys that couldn't handle it. And so you never wanted to admit that you were struggling, because then you're that guy, right? And I think that if you look at what's going on, at least in the special operations community and naval special warfare, there is now an enormous support system, enormous push for awareness and a removing of that stigma after a particularly difficult deployment. it's part of the command to support that. And we now in the United States and also in the UK, I believe, we identify this as an injury. We no longer say, well, there's injured people and then there's these nut guys, these PTS guys, right? They now call this, a mental health injury. There's even a subcategory now called moral injury, where you can actually get help because of moral conflict that you suffered because of things that you had to see or things you had to do. And so I agree with everything you said, and it's certainly the proof is in the pudding, right? So it's certainly not better yet. We still have, more than 20 veteran suicides a day in our country. So we're clearly not doing the job. But at least it's no longer because we've given it a stigma, and at least it's no longer because we're not aware of it. I think there's a national awareness, and I think that the VA has stepped up their ability to identify and treat and offer therapy, and we've removed the stigma. There's still so much left to do in both our countries, as evidenced by the number of people that we had, from the Naval Special Warfare community between last fall and this summer. We had another, half a dozen guys kill themselves, late career guys who were, some of them still on active duty, some of them already out. So it's still a problem, but at least they're taking those steps. Does that make sense? I mean, I think that's a big, important step.
Absolutely. I think over here we've had a campaign, and I think Prince William and certainly Prince Harry, before he defected, was championing the "It's Okay Not to Be Okay" campaign, and a lot of hard work has gone into taking the stigma out of mental unwellness, and I think that's helping a lot. But we're seeing the same. We're seeing an unprecedented amount of veterans that are taking their own lives because they don't know where to turn. I mean, where I live in the south of England, in this area, it's the biggest concentration of veterans in the UK, and we've got several veterans groups. One is the Veterans Outreach Support, which is fantastic. In fact, I was with them this afternoon. We have a tea and stickies. So there was, I think, 39 veterans turned up today, mainly because there were sausage and bacon sandwiches on offer. And it's just being in that community again, and having that little bit of banter, and it does help maintaining those links, and I think that's quite important. And it's the veteran that goes into the community where there isn't a veteran community. Those are the guys that tend to suffer more. But there's lots and lots of, in the UK we've got over 2,000 charities that are dedicated to veterans. And at this time of the year it's quite prevalent that we've got remembrance coming up on the 11th of November, which is Armistice Day.
I think that's an important point that you make, that you don't have to, if you're a veteran, you don't feel like you want to go to public health or in your case, or VA in our case. There are these great nonprofits, charities, like you said, and many of them, especially now here in the States, are founded by veterans, right? They're people who became aware that, oh my gosh, I have this problem. I suffered and I navigated my way mostly through it. I think most people who run these type of operations will admit that it's a daily battle. It's never a battle that you can say I won and walk away from, but they've found techniques and they're willing to share their experience. And so that's one way for, if you're not comfortable going into the hospital or VA or public health, but you're still looking for that help, look for these veteran-run organizations, because they're your people and they're people that have gone through the same thing as you.
Yeah, it's quite surprising the amount of guys that, I mean, when you sort of mention that you've had problems yourself, well, I did as well, and that's where I think the vast majority of veterans have at some stage in their career seen stuff that the ordinary person wouldn't be able to cope with. But I think down to our training and all the rest of it, it gives us that extra tool in the box but then when you finish your career, then that tool sort of slips away or drops into the bottom of the box, and that's when it can catch up with you. But I think from the veterans community side of it, there's always help. So what I would say to guys is that whatever you're suffering, somebody else is suffering exactly the same, that's gone through the same that you have, and all you have to do is reach out. And the first thing to do is recognising yourself that you're not right. And once you've come to terms with that part, then it's so easy to get the help that's out there.
Yeah, I think that's right, and I think that you hit on the most important part, is that admitting that it's not, everything's not okay with you. It's okay to be not okay, right? Like you said earlier.
Absolutely.
And I think that part of that is that removing of the stigma. And I think the message I would have to veterans that are listening tonight that are struggling with that side of it, the coming to terms with maybe I'm not okay, is, what we've learned about in the United States, we've actually removed the D from PTSD. So the diagnosis now is PTS, because what we've identified is that it's not a disorder. And I think that if you can help veterans understand that it's normal to have the concerns and the struggles, have bad dreams, have, anxiety, all the things that you're suffering under the umbrella of PTS are not abnormalities. They are, in fact, hugely normal. It is an abnormal human condition to take a human life, or to have someone try to kill you, or to watch your buddies get killed, to lose large numbers of friends in violent circumstance. That is not a normal part of the human condition. And so what would be abnormal is to go through all of that and have no response to it. That's called a sociopath. Like if you can do these things and go through these things and have no effect of it, that's abnormal. And so I think what I try to tell veterans, I work on the faith side of this in my town where I live in Florida, dealing with the moral injury, dealing with the crisis in faith that can happen as a result of military service. And what we try to explain to these guys is that it is completely normal to have some degree of PTS. If you have experienced combat, you have PTS. We should just start there. If you have been in combat, if you have earned a combat infantry badge, you have PTS. Now, some people might have such a minor bit of it that it's not affecting their function, and they deal with it just fine, and they've got a support system in their family or whatever. I'm not saying that everyone needs to go get help. But if you start from, we all have it, now figure out what degree of it do you have, so that you can connect with the people you need to connect to get the support you need. Then it doesn't feel so dirty, right? It doesn't feel like, okay, I'm admitting I'm one of those guys. I'm admitting that I'm the guy that couldn't hack it. That's not it at all, especially because you made the best point, which is it crashes in on you after. The fact that you continue to function throughout your military service is evidence that you could hack it. You're strong, you did it, you put it in its box, and you got the job done. Now that the job is done, your brain is screaming to you and saying, we didn't deal with this, and we need to. It's not like Brian said, there's no cure for it. You're going to cure this. What you're going to do is you're going to arm yourself with tools that will help you manage this and enjoy your life. That's all. And that's something everybody should want. So I think that's the message I try to give to people, and anyone that's listening tonight, is just that. It's normal. You're normal if you need some help now and again. So find the help, whether it's connecting with your mates from the service, or whether it's connecting with, your version of the VA or a charitable organization, or connecting with someone at your church, whatever it is, get that support. Don't wait until you're in crisis, because that's a mistake.
Yeah. I think that is spot on, actually. I think if we push that message out that we've all got post-traumatic stress, and it's normal to have it, then it's so much easier to take the stigma out of it.
Yeah, 100%. Like no one would say, "Oh man, I'm weak because that fire gave me a burn. I'm not going to go to the emergency room. I don't want people to know that I have that weak, fragile skin that gets burned in fire." Right? It's like, my hand was in fire. I got burned. Like you run off to the ER and you don't think twice about it. If we can just approach it that way, I think it would be much healthier and people would get the help that they need.
Brilliant. I think I'm going to take a different tack on all of that. I'm going to push that everybody's got some sort of post-traumatic stress, and it's normal to have it, and the way to deal with it is go and talk about it.
100%.
Well, guys, fantastic. I've really enjoyed our little chat there. So
we have as
thank
well.
you for your input.
Yeah, thanks for giving us the opportunity to share.
No, I'd love to have another chat with you about your books. So thank you once again.
It's our pleasure. If you're anyone that's interested in our books, can go to our website. Everything you need to know is there. It's not worth having a whole conversation about. It's andrews-wilson.com. You can find out more about what we do in our post-military service life. We'd love to connect with you. There's ways to connect with us through the website. There's also places on the website where we have partner agencies that we love, such as All Secure Foundation and Seal Legacy Foundation and Chad Robichaux's Mighty Oaks Foundation. These are organizations that we partner with to get veterans the help that they need. So go to our website, andrews-wilson.com, if for no other reason than to find those connections. But there's also a lot of cool stuff about our books. So
fantastic. Well, I'll get all that down in the description. So
wonderful.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Well, that was a fascinating chat. Now, the only reason we've had to cut it short is because the guys have got a nip off on another show. But I'll do my best to get them back on another time and we can continue the conversation because I think they make some fantastic points. So until next time, Lord Heale saying TTFN. Ta-da for now.